Welcome dear learners to this session on rural marketing, where we will focus on rural population and rural marketing model. This session will deal with understanding how companies approach rural consumers and how demographic shift between rural and urban India influence marketing decisions. Let's begin with our learning objectives for this unit. After completing this session, you should be able to first differentiate between rural and urban consumer segment by analyzing the key demographic patterns in India. Second, explain the core rural marketing models, namely the trickle down, undifferentiated, differentiated and bottom of the pyramid approaches. Third, understand how the trickle down model works, especially how rural market gradually adopts urban consumption trends. Fourth, examine the undifferentiated strategy which uses similar marketing efforts for rural and urban market without major changes. Fifth, analyze the differentiated approach which fits marketing methods to suit the needs and conditions of rural consumers. And last, explore the bottom of pyramid approach which blends inclusive marketing with social entrepreneurship. Let's now begin with an introduction to rural marketing. It is a process of understanding and catering to unique needs of rural consumers which are quite different from those of their urban counterparts. So, what makes rural marketing so different? A key factor is the distinct socio-economic environment. Rural consumers are influenced by factors such as limited infrastructure, lower income level, cultural values and accessibility challenges. This difference means that companies must adopt specific strategies to effectively connect with rural markets. Now, you might be wondering, do companies use the same approach for rural markets as they do for the urban ones? The answer is not quite. In fact, several strategic frameworks have been developed to address the uniqueness of rural marketing. This includes the trickle down approach, the undifferentiated approach, the differentiated approach and the bottom of pyramid approach. Each of these models is guided by specific philosophical orientations. Let me ask you, why do you think companies would adopt such varied models for the same market? The answer lies in the diversity of rural India. There is no one size fit all model. What works in one rural region may not work in the other. Therefore, understanding these models is essential for successful rural marketing. To understand rural marketing fully, we must first look into the demographic trends that define the rural and urban divide. According to the data from 2018 to 2022, India experienced a notable demographic transition. During this time, the rural population remained largely stable, growing modestly from 903.13 million to 908.80 million. This is an increase of just around 5.7 million over 4 years. In contrast, the urban population increased significantly, that is from 465.87 million to 508.37 million, which is a growth of nearly 42.5 million people. This indicates that urban areas are expanding rapidly. If we look at the percentage share, rural India declined from 65.97 in 2018 to 64.13 in 2022, while the urban share rose from 34.03 to 35.87. This gradual shift highlights the important trend of urbanization. Now, here is a question: why is urbanization increasing in India? There are several reasons like better job opportunities in cities, access to quality education and healthcare, improved infrastructure and living standard. As people move from rural areas to urban centers, it changes the consumer base and market dynamics. However, it also creates new challenges and opportunities in rural marketing. Despite migration, rural India still represents a massive market with over 900 million consumers. Moving ahead is understanding rural marketing approaches. Let us start by asking a simple question: do companies use the same marketing strategy for every type of market? The answer is no. The nature of rural market demands different approaches that are sensitive to lifestyle, aspiration, purchasing power, and access limitations for rural consumers. Based on real-world practices and theory, 4 major rural marketing approaches has been identified. First is trickle-down approach. This is often the starting point for companies entering rural markets. In the trickle-down approach, the primary focus is not on rural at all. Instead, companies launch their products in urban areas, promote them heavily, and rely on these products eventually become popular in the rural areas. Second is the undifferentiated approach. As the name suggests, this strategy treats urban and rural markets as the same. Companies use identical marketing strategies for both segments with only minor changes, such as translating advertisements into regional languages. Third is the differentiated approach. This is perhaps the most consumer-focused strategy. Here, companies acknowledge the real difference between rural and urban consumers and design specific marketing strategies for the rural segment. The fourth one is the bottom of pyramid marketing. It is the most progressive and inclusive model often associated with Dr. C.K. Prahalad. This strategy views rural consumers not as a passive buyers but as an active market participants. Consumers who are low on income but high on potential and resilience. Bottom of the pyramid marketing is based on what we called as 4 A's, that is affordability, accessibility, availability and awareness. Now that we understand the 4 models, let us consider the philosophical orientation behind them. Why do companies choose one model over the other? Some companies treat rural marketing as a part of their corporate social responsibility. For them, the goal is not only profit but also social contributions. These companies invest in education, health, or infrastructural projects in rural areas. Others take a profit-driven approach, focusing on market expansion and revenue growth. Their aim is to penetrate rural markets and capture the new demand. Finally, some firms directly follow Dr. Prahalad's bottom of the pyramid philosophy, where the focus is both on making a difference and making money. These firms combine innovation, ethics, and sustainability in their rural strategies. Moving next, we will have a detailed discussion on the first and foremost foundational strategies in rural marketing, that is, the trickle-down approach. This model reflects how many companies initially entered rural markets not by focusing directly on rural consumers, but instead by concentrating on urban markets and assuming that the rural adoption will follow over time. Let us now discuss their logic, assumptions, applications, and limitation of this approach. Moving on to the concept and assumptions, let us take a question: why would a company ignore such a large rural market? The answer lies in a set of assumptions companies make, often based on market perception and resource priorities. Let us explore these 3 main assumptions. First is the negligible rural market significance. Many firms assume that rural market contributes only marginal revenue. They consider rural sales as supplementary, not as a major driver of business. Hence, they don't feel the need to create a separate rural strategy. The second is cultural homogeneity at the aspirational level. Another core assumption is that rural consumers, especially the wealthy ones, aspire to imitate the lifestyle of urban elite. Companies believe that the rural aspirations are not fundamentally different from the urban desires, particularly in terms of brand preference, style, and consumption behavior. These aspirations are thought to be shaped by media exposure, migration patterns, and peer influence. The third one is the dependence on feeder town. It is also assumed that the rural consumers generally shop from nearby towns, often referred to as feeder towns. Whether for employment, healthcare, or regular travel, these consumers are exposed to urban retail environments. So, firms believe that there is no pressing need to build rural-specific supply chain or campaigns. Now, let's examine where this strategy fits the best. The trickle-down model is particularly suitable for premium and luxury products that are priced beyond the average rural consumer affordability. This includes luxury apparel brands like Lee Cooper, high-end electronics such as large screen televisions and dual technology refrigerators, prestige automobiles from brands like Mercedes-Benz, BMW and Audi, imported designer furniture like Damero. Such products are not essential, they are aspirational and lifestyle driven. Their demand in rural markets comes not from the rural-centric advertising, but from indirect exposure. However, the trickle-down approach has clear limitations. It ignores the diversity and complexity of rural consumers. It also assumes that the aspiration alone can replace targeted engagement, which may not always be true, especially for essential, low-cost or fast-moving consumer goods. Interestingly, while companies using the trickle-down model may not be deeply invested in rural marketing, many of them actively participate in rural development through the CSR initiatives. Now, you may be wondering, why would a company invest in rural CSR if it is not directly marketing there? The reason is rooted in ethics, corporate values, brand image, and sometimes regulatory expectations. According to World Business Council for Sustainable Development, CSR is the continuous commitment by companies to behave ethically, contribute to economic development, and improve the quality of life of workers, their families, and larger communities. India as a country has rich history of corporate social responsibility. One of the most respected example is the Tata Group, which has long embedded into CSR into its business philosophy, not as a tool for publicity, but as a commitment to the real societal values. Let us consider few prominent examples of CSR. Godrej Consumer Product Limited adopted a school in Singwari village offering scholarship to scheduled caste and scheduled tribe students. Similarly, Dabur India Limited created Sandesh, a dedicated body for rural welfare back in 1993. Lafarge Cement introduced projects on employability, low-cost housing and rural educations. BPCL adopted 37 villages and invested for over 15 years in healthcare, vocational training, drinking water and agriculture. ACC Cement began its village welfare scheme in 1952, long before CSR was formally regulated. Quoting Ratan Tata, the legendary industrialist, said, "We do not do it for propaganda, we do not do it for publicity, we do it for the satisfaction of having really achieved something worthwhile." This reflects a deeper philosophical and ethical approach to business. Let us move ahead to discuss motivations and drivers of CSR in India. Corporate social responsibility is not always purely philanthropic. Companies are driven by multiple factors: ethical belief of the founders or leadership, brand reputation and relationship building, government initiatives such as tax benefits and industrial policy rewards, long-term market development in undeserved areas. So, even if company does not directly sell to the rural consumers, its CSR program can plant seeds of brand trust, laying a foundation for future market entry. Within the trickle-down model, marketing is not product focused in rural regions. Instead, It serves two main purposes. First, educational and development outreach. Companies support awareness building and developmental activities in rural areas. This may not be directly tied to brand but contribute to community progress such as health camp or training workshops. And second, the corporate image enhancement. Through CSR visibility, companies project themselves as responsible and ethical. Even if rural consumers do not buy from them immediately, the brand goodwill travels, especially when urban-based relatives or community influencers speak positively about the company. This form of indirect brand building fits perfectly with the trickle-down logic. It creates urban-rural alignment in terms of perception, even in the absence of direct rural engagement. To conclude, the trickle-down approach represents a strategy rooted in urban focus and aspirational transmission. It assumes that the urban popularity will naturally extend to the rural markets, especially for high-end goods, although it has limitations in addressing the needs and diversity of rural consumers. It is often supported by strong CSR program which improves companies' image and social relevance. Moving next, we shall now discuss the undifferentiated approach in rural marketing. Let us begin by asking an important question. If urban and rural consumers are different, why do companies use the same strategy for both? The answer lies in the undifferentiated approach, a strategy that assumes similarities between rural and urban consumers and focuses on using same marketing plan with only minor adjustments for rural areas. Let us now understand how this model evolved, what assumptions it relies on, its suitability, and the role of marketing and CSR in making it work. The undifferentiated approach to rural marketing developed when companies realized that the earlier trickle-down approach had limitations. As opportunities in rural markets grew, particularly in 1990s and 2000s, companies in FMCG and consumer durable sectors started acknowledging the value of the rural consumers. However, instead of designing complex or highly localized marketing strategies, they decided to extend their urban strategies to rural regions with minimal modifications. The belief was simple: if a marketing strategy works in an urban area, it should work in rural one too, especially when the product is standardized and mass market. This approach avoids large investment in customization and instead emphasizes scalability by reaching both urban and rural consumers through a shared platform. In some cases, corporate social responsibility efforts are also used as a part of brand building exercises in rural regions, a practice which is also referred to as cause branding. So, now let's look into 4 vital assumptions that support this approach. First is affordability. Many rural consumers belong to low income groups, making purchasing power a key constraint. Their income is often linked to agriculture and can fluctuate due to changing weather conditions, especially the monsoon. Because of this, assumption is that products need to be affordable. But companies don't alter the product, rather they focus on combining urban and rural markets where infrastructure allows. One practical example is, why would a company sell a 100-gram shampoo bottle in the urban areas but a sachet version in the rural areas? The answer is affordability. Rural consumers may not spend on large bottles, but they are likely to purchase a sachet that suits the daily budget. The second factor is accessibility. Rural markets often suffer from poor roads and weak transportation system, which makes reaching consumer a challenge. Instead of building entirely new supply chains, companies stretch their urban distribution network to rural areas with limited penetration. This reduces cost, though it may not provide a complete market coverage. The third factor is acceptance. The third assumption is that rural consumers desire the same brand and lifestyles as urban consumers. It is believed that the rural aspirations have evolved significantly, especially after the 1990s, with economic reforms, media penetration, and urban exposures. Companies think that cultural and consumption differences are more administrative than real. The question here is this always true? The answer will be not always. While aspirations have converged to some extent, purchasing decision, users pattern and local context often remain different. But this assumption still allows companies to avoid deep customization. The fourth assumption is availability. Traditional rural market lacked access to branded FMCG products with agribusinesses dominating. But over time, rural consumers started showing interest in the same brand available in the urban markets, provided those brands were made available to them. Hence, availability, not the preference, became the main barrier. These assumptions are not made without evidences. One of the most important validation came from NCAER survey of 1994, which showed that rural and urban consumer had surprisingly similar preferences in many product categories. Products like television, wristwatches, fans, refrigerators and two-wheelers were found to be popular in both the segments. Similarly, leading brands like Lux, Lifebuoy, Liril, Synthol, Nirma, Surf, Colgate, Promise, Everyday and Nippo has strong presence in both the markets. Companies drew an interesting conclusion from these findings. If the urban market can include both metro cities and smaller towns without major strategic shifts, rural markets too can be handled in a similar way, with minor adoption rather than major changes. In terms of suitability, this approach is particularly suitable for companies that are already dealing with standardized products, especially in the FMCG and consumer durable space. These companies target middle and lower income segments in both the markets using the same core message, product line and distribution plan. Instead of creating separate campaign for rural area, they focus on efficient distribution and mass communication. The key here is to manage scale without significantly increasing the cost. Now, here's something very strategic. Many companies using the undifferentiated approach also engage in CSR initiative not just out for philanthropy, but as a marketing tool. This idea is known as cause branding. So, what exactly is cause branding? It's when company links its CSR activities with brand identity, enhancing both its public image and business goals. Let's take some real world examples. ICT Limited used social forestry, primary education and watershed development to align with its business and paper boats and agriculture. Similarly, Hindustan Unilever Limited initiated several impactful programs like Fair and Lovely's foundation supported women's financial independence, Project Saraswati provided scholarship to girls, Project Disha focused on career counseling, Project Kala Darshan trained young girls in stitching and designing, Project Sanjeevani in collaboration with Dr. Ladies Labs trained women in nursing, Colgate's Project Jagriti collaborated with the Indian Dental Association to promote oral hygiene in over 20,000 villages, reaching more than 6 million rural residents. These initiatives were not just about social goods. They were also highly effective in marketing strategies. In fact, they often worked better than commercial advertising in building trust and brand presence in rural areas. Now, let us discuss the role of marketing in undifferentiated approach. In this approach, marketing is not deeply customized. The focus remains on distribution and visibility rather than on modifying the product, price or promotional methods. Standard urban advertisements are either translated or dubbed into local languages and broadcast through low-cost channels such as radio, mobile van campaigns, cinema halls, and wall printing. Let's understand how this distribution system works. Companies usually appoint stockists in the small towns with a population of around 20,000. These stockists then supply the product to nearby villages, covering almost 1 lakh rural settlements. In fact, over 90% of sales of consumer durables happens in these small towns, which serves as a hub. Thanks to the CSR program and occasional advertisements, rural consumers become aware of brands and start demanding them, reducing the need for direct product distribution to the remote areas. To conclude, the undifferentiated approach offers companies a cost-effective way to enter and expand in rural markets. It assumes that urban marketing efforts with minor adjustments are sufficient to tap rural demands. Although it does not fully engage with rural uniqueness, it is backed by consumer data, scalable models, and CSR-based brand building. In this lecture, we will stop here. In the second part of the continuing session, we will explore differentiated approach, which takes the opposite view that rural market deserve strategies designed specifically for them. Thank you very much.